But if we drill down into the issues that I'm sure that you have prepared, for example, you talked about reforms that were put in place or at least started during the time of Cory Aquino and FVR that appear to have been left by the wayside. What are these issues and what issues would you like to pursue?
Well, then we're touching on my platform, okay, which is, I'll capture it first in 3 phrases. First is build the nation. Second is protect the country, the people. And third is secure the country. Building the nation is about software and hardware. Software is the people. Okay, hardware is our institutions. All right? You know, we've lost our way. We've lost our moral moorings. In 1992, one of the first executive orders of President Ramos was for every department in government to institute a moral recovery program. Basically, a return to ethics, knowing what's right and wrong, and choosing right over wrong, and making sure that the people under us understood that carefully, and those that didn't had to be weeded out. Okay? That's why we undertook a massive house cleaning of the PNP. Sinibak namin ang mga scalawags, no? Tinanggal sa trabaho, and some of them we filed cases against. I think you knew that because you were part, I think, of the press corps. We also undertook a social reform agenda. Our social reform agenda focused on poverty reduction because many of our Filipino families were separated. I mean, literally, physically separated because their heads of family had to work outside to make sure the families survived on a day-to-day basis. And single parenthood has affected the stability of the family because single parents really can't handle rearing their young at the same time helping in bringing home the bacon, right? So anong nangyari? Nagkawatak-watak ang pamilya natin. Discipline problem arose. All right? Pumasok ang droga. Right? Pumasok yung unwanted pregnancies. Right? So, a lot of social ills came about, including health costs. Napakataas ng health cost on account of separated families due to poverty. All right? Resulting in criminality, etc. Ang gulo ng bayan. So, our job, my platform, is to focus on reuniting our families. Those that are separated by poverty, then we will focus on an economic agenda that generates jobs, more livelihood, and opportunities for wealth creation, new wealth, creating new wealth. And what are we talking about? Tourism development. The same way that the Europeans and successful ASEAN countries have done so, using ecotourism, agritourism, cultural tourism, historical tourism, etc., to the max to generate jobs and livelihood. Second is agricultural revival. You know, most of our poor who are working abroad come from the rural areas, from the agricultural areas. Why? Because walang income dun, walang profit, hawak ng mga traders, and they're focused always on raw materials, walang downstream development to produce finished products. Can you imagine, we sell raw material 10 pesos per kilo, and then we import the finished product 100 pesos per 100 grams. It's ridiculous, right? So agricultural revival is very important to bring back our people back to the rural areas and earning a living, a decent living. And then manufacturing expansion. Our manufacturing industries are stunted, you know. We're not developing enough jobs as expected like other countries. And we should take advantage of what's happening in China. There's a lot of foreign investors that are relocating out of China, and they're looking for good places to, you know, put their businesses in. We should take advantage of that. Number 4, we should also take into account the fact that the world is investing a lot in not just high tech, but advanced tech, like AI. No? we should be part of that process as well, so that we can leapfrog. No? So there are many things that need to be done. Now, from the standpoint of legislation, what will I do? First, I'll have to look at what's there. Is the legislation enough to push for tourism, to push for the revival of agriculture, for manufacturing, and for high-tech? Or are there gaps? If there are gaps, then we'll close the gaps. If there's no legislation, then we introduce new legislation.
Okay.
But if the problem is implementation, then legislative oversight comes in. Right? We'll have to ask the executive, we've given you good laws, how come you're not implementing? Okay. That's what I'll do when I get to the Senate.
Okay, but if the proposition is that there's something wrong with our culture and that there's a selfishness and a self-centeredness among citizens, what's the proposition for that? What's the cure for that?
Then we have to go back and we have to reflect as a society. There must be a national dialogue why we are like this, and everything begins with education. The way we educate ourselves at home, and then how it is reinforced in school and in the workplace. Kasi dugtong-dugtong yan eh. You can't just go through the motions by, telling your children, okay, these are the values, without making sure that they internalize it and they apply it on a daily basis. Okay? That's, I think, where the disconnect is. We've been going through the motions, but we haven't been responsible enough to make sure that our children, our youth, actually apply the values that are taught to them. In school, the teachers, do they stop cheating? Do they go out of their way to stop cheating? Parents, do they get together with their teachers, with their parents-teachers associations? Do they get together and say, okay, let's examine how are the kids' character being formed? And then are they monitoring that, supervising it? I myself, I've sat on many boards in La Salle Bacolod, De La Salle Manila, AIM, and I've asked our administrators, how come there's so much wrongdoing in school and in the workplace? Our graduates, many of them are brought to court, whether they're politicians or businessmen. What happened to the values we taught them? How come they've forgotten them? There's something wrong with the way we're teaching our values. So, part of my platform, which is Build the Nation, I mentioned earlier it's software and hardware. The software has to do with education, and that begins with instilling values, returning to a values-driven life. Because the family is being torn apart because of that.
Yes,
You're
but how
running
do you
for the
operationalize
Senate.
this?
Yeah. Could you give us a specific example of legislation that you plan to propose?
We will have to sit down with DepEd, all right? We will have, it will have to be broad consultations with civil society, with the DepEd, with SHED, and we have to study, look at the curriculum. How are we teaching, how are we forming the character of our children? Character formation yan eh. How are we instilling values in our children? During my time, I was taught good manners and right conduct. Today, nawala na yon. When we were kids, we had history. All right? I don't know whether the history we were being taught was enough, but we were being taught history, we were being taught geography.
So that's a
Today, wala na.
specific proposal niya.
So,
return good manners and right conduct teaching.
We need to reform education. Okay? Educational reform is crucial. Right? Because there's another aspect to educational reform. There's a mismatch between the demands of the 21st century and the kinds of graduates that we're churning out. Hindi makatugma. No? That's the reason why the unemployment rate is also kind of high. Or,
so competitiveness na yan.
or a teacher getting a job as a DH because there are not enough jobs for teachers, right? So, job mismatch. because of the curriculum. So educational reform is very important. We have to study the curriculum.